Hi again then guys, and welcome to the 24th place pick out of my top 50 absolute favourite vehicles in the world for 2018, of course, and pretty much anyone's list, especially once you get up around 50 cars, is bound to have cars that all shift and move, and once you include bikes as well, of course that's going to be the case. And for me personally, even while making this series, I've had a few occasions where I've regretted putting certain vehicles as low as they were and actually shifted some that were lower and put them much, much higher. In fact, one car in particular was not in my top 10, and when I actually thought about it, it is in my top 10 favourites, so I completely shifted it. Now this one is a vehicle which I can kind of have a shift in opinion on any particular day. When I love this car, I absolutely adore it, and when I don't, I like it a lot. So I never dislike it or hate it or anything like that. It's just a car which I occasionally feel indifferent about, but occasionally I have that spark of intrigue again. But the reason why it certainly deserves a place in the top half of the list for me is because the Lister Storm, it really does tick all of the boxes of cars that I love. For one thing, it has the nostalgia of many of the others that I love, like the Renault Espace F1, because once again I was introduced to it way back in the early days of my gaming experience on Gran Turismo 2. I loved it back then, didn't fully appreciate what the car was or why it was important, and funnily enough, a lot of people don't respect this car. Now, Lister has actually announced a potential return of the Storm, called the Lister Storm 2 on Twitter. Personally, I think that's an awesome thing which could happen. Doubtless it won't have the appeal of this one for me, because with a car like this, I think it would be very difficult to beat the original. It's such an iconic and unique supercar. And in terms of people not recognising why it's so good, well, put simply, this was the fastest four-seater car in the world for a decade. And yet people don't even take any notice of that. And the reason why is fairly obvious. The McLaren F1 came out at around a similar time and completely overshadowed it. Now, of course, it's nowhere near as quick as the McLaren, but it's not slow. This car has roughly the same kind of power as an XJ220, but it has 4 seats, way more trunk space, and is much more inclined to be kind of a Mercedes SLR McLaren style or Aston Martin Vanquish style long-distance supercar, with more of an emphasis on space, comfort, and luxury. And I love that. I love cars, as you can already tell from this list, with stuff like the Isso Grifo and various others, the Maserati Gran Cabrio, the Aston Martin Rapide, the Tesla P90D, cars which blend practicality, performance, and luxury. That is a win for me, and very few do that as well as the Lister Storm, because the Lister Storm is one of those cars which is a true practical supercar. Now, there are hardly any built, and they are obscenely expensive. When used, they can easily outdo Carrera GTs and SLR McLarens, and at the same time, this is almost the car that the XJ220 should have been, in some ways, because it actually has the big, naturally aspirated V12 that the XJ220 never had. Now, the XJ220, of course, did just fine with the engine that it was fitted with, and it's a very unique engine, and I respect very much so what it was capable of, given that engine. The Lister Storm, though, for me is just an infinitely cooler car. 7-litre V12, naturally aspirated, around 540-550 horsepower. The top speed, if I recall, is something like 205 miles per hour, I think it was, so similar to the Chizeta, the V16T from the last episode. 0 to 60 isn't the best in the world, but it is a heavier car. Again, it's a four-seater, I should say, and the look of this car is another reason why I love it so much. It's a car which I think can certainly divide opinion, because it's very unique. When you enter the world of supercars, there are a lot which you could say, well, it's unique. Nothing else looks quite like a Celine S7. Nothing else looks quite like a Zonda. And that's true, but at the same time, they have very clear inspiration. The Celine S7 looks like a GT1 car or a Group C car. The Zonda is based on a Group C car, the Sauber C11. Various other supercars have homages or similarities to others, but with the Lister Storm, it really is one of the very few cars which you can legitimately say looks like nothing else. There is no other car which looks anything like a Lister Storm unless it's specifically trying to. for instance, something that maybe came out after that I can't quite recall, that was just a copy of the Lister Storm. But as far as I can think of, there wasn't really anything like that. But this car was only dethroned in the mid-2000s. This car was brought out in something like 1993, and it wasn't beaten until Brabus took the Mercedes CLS, I think it was, and turned it into the Brabus Rocket. And that was the first four-seater to beat this car. Now, it beat it by a lot, but it took someone 10 years to do so. And I guarantee something else. If you put a Lister Storm up against that Brabus Rocket around a circuit, it wouldn't even come close. The Storm would demolish that Mercedes, because straight line performance is one thing, but this is the true brilliance of the Lister Storm. As I've said with others, it truly blends practicality and exotic performance. It has the 4 seats, it has the long distance appeal, it has the luxury, it has the trunk space even, but at the same time, it's a 200 mile per hour, 0 to 60 in whatever it was, like 4.5 seconds or so, powerful, torquey, fantastic looking, incredible sounding, ultra exclusive, obscenely expensive, and also great around corners, especially in comparison to other 4-seaters. Of course, it can be outrun by track day supercars like the Ascari A10, it goes without saying. But at the same time, stuff like Astons, Jags, other large luxury supercars would have a hard time beating a Lister Storm around a track. It has racing counterparts. It really is the whole package for me. Now, the way I'm talking about it, you probably think that it should be even higher on the list, and I know for some of you guys it is higher on the list, or would be. For some people, the Lister Storm is their favourite car, and I can completely understand that. It's an incredible machine. I've always loved the Storm, and it's one of the few cars on this list which, although it shifts around a bit, it's never really not been there. This is always a car, since I was about 6 years old, that would be in my top 50. And there are very few cars that can remain like that. It's an incredible supercar. I would say a pretty close to perfect one, actually. In fact, it could even be considered to be a perfect supercar in its own way. But that's it for the 24th pick on my list. Of course, if you are new to this series, you can see all of my others that we've done so far by clicking through at the end. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.